Well, this video could go in a few different directions because I wanted to talk briefly about if I was president, kind of, but I also wanted to talk about what I would consider or call the biggest scam. Okay, what do I mean by this? Well, here's the thing. First off, if you enjoy this content, be sure you're subscribed. It really helps out the channel. Plus, this is a new channel, so obviously it helps out. But also, when I consider something or call something out as the biggest scam, I'm usually talking about the how do I want to phrase this, because I don't want to make this video terribly long, but profit in the form of ownership, I guess, is a good way to phrase this. Now, that is not to say that someone who owns a thing should not profit from the thing. Obviously, if I create instructions for something that I've built out of Lego stuff for my main channel, then yeah, I should absolutely be able to sell the instructions that I made for it if I so choose, although often I give them out for free. But that said, that is a right of mine as a creator of an item. However, as somebody who owns, let's say, a company. In fact, I can just speak from my own experience. I worked for Walmart in the past, and so I look at it like this. As someone who owns a company like Walmart, should that owner, who for all intents and purposes does nothing to help perpetuate the existence of that store could still exist by any other name, under any other ownership, but who fills the role solely as an owner of this company, then go out of their way to make profits from said company. And I'm talking obscene profits in comparison to the workers who actually put forward the labor that allows that company to exist in the first place. Because if all Walmart workers quit, or any company for that matter, if they all quit, the owners could not keep those companies afloat. They would go under. It's not to say that the owners would be any worse off. Again, we're talking about multi-billionaires here, right? At the end of the day, my answer, simply put in an unnuanced sense, is no, of course not. I am of the belief that if I were to go create my own company, I would much rather have a system of profit sharing than, oh, I own the company, so I make the most money as the owner, and then I give out a pittance, just a little bit of money here and there to my employees, as little as I can legally get away with, because that's gross, right? I often view money in a lot of ways, especially the accumulation of wealth, as a sort of virus, which is not true, like by the scientific sense. But I look at it this way because there are so many people who have obscene levels of wealth, but are not happy enough to know that they could live the rest of their life more than comfortably, hell, supporting in some cases small countries comfortably and be perfectly fine. But they always need to find a way to have more. And more often than not, their method of getting more is by taking advantage of their workers or their customers, or really any means they can. They want to scrape every single penny out of the barrel as best they can, and in as many ways as possible make sure that their employees are getting as little as possible, which is why you have so many companies that all outsource their labor, right? Because if they can get away with paying workers in, I don't know, the Philippines or something like that, much less than they can pay workers here, of course they would move it over there. From a purely capitalistic perspective, that just makes sense, right? More money for the person creating it. Now, I've spoken on the main channel before I was kind of making content over here about some of my own experiences. And one of those experiences that I briefly got into around, I want to say 2019 or right before the pandemic, 2020, somewhere in there, was actually starting to learn about wholesaling when it came to houses, real estate, right? And I actually got fairly close towards buying my first place, if you will. I guess buying isn't technically true because wholesaling does not rely on the purchasing of houses, but I'm not going to get into that here. That's a complicated thing, and it's something that I don't believe in anymore. It's not to say that all wholesalers are bad. I'm not going to make a broad statement like that, but rather that the idea of this system fundamentally is bad. And I realized that the people that it preyed upon were often people in the worst situations, desperate for finances, right? And those are easily people that you can take advantage of to make the most money possible. I was learning from courses that you should try to manipulate people as much as possible. Try to basically build rapport with them and pretend that you're in situations much like their own so that they're more willing to sell you this thing that they basically have no choice to sell for as little money as possible. And oftentimes they would try to make it as sympathetic as possible too, talking about, oh, people who inherit houses but don't like want to pay the property tax on it, so they just opt to get rid of it, or there's complicated paperwork. But more often than not, realistically, those are not the people you'd be basically stealing houses from. It's people who are being foreclosed on, right? People who are already facing a wall and have nearly nowhere to go. And rather than try to rally support for those people or help them start a GoFundMe or something like that, or help to dig them out of the hole they're in, even so that if they do get foreclosed upon, maybe they can have something to move forward, because foreclosure is terrifying, right? But outside of that, it was actually all about trying to expedite this process to get them to essentially sell you the house for, slightly more than they would get being foreclosed on. It's disgusting, right? It is ultimately you trying to take a house that could be, several hundreds of thousands of dollars for a few thousand, or in some cases, anecdotally, even a couple of $100s. Wild that this is a thing that could happen, but the idea is that you're not, once again, you're not buying the house. Here's the thing. As I'm continuing to learn about this, and it's just rubbing me the wrong way, right? Making all of my empathy alarm bells go off. I'm wondering how the people that I'm learning from are able to do something like this and have teams of people that do the work for them. Because it's worth noting too, that basically all the work these people are ultimately doing is, if they're doing it themselves, meeting the person who is selling the house. But they're not making the phone calls. They hire somebody else to do that. And of course, they don't hire American citizens to do that, who they have to pay a, $12 minimum wage or whatever, depending on what state they work in. But rather, they hire, once again, people from the Philippines, which is why I brought up the Philippines as an anecdote earlier, because the minimum wage, at least at this point in time, was significantly lower than it is here, right? And so they were just like, oh, but it's because their work ethic is so much better. Has nothing to do with the work ethic. It's the convenience of, oh, I can just pay them a hell of a lot less so I can make as much money as possible. One of these people was talking about how they wanted to become a billionaire, and that's a bad desire. I'm going to be honest. Arguably my biggest red flag when I meet a person is if they say that they want to essentially succeed at capitalism, right? That they want to become a multi-millionaire or a billionaire. It's not to say that I am against somebody who wants to make sure that they have a comfortable life, that they have a safety net in the future. We should all aim for that. But imagine a scenario where we're guaranteed a life of our own, or we can even chase our hobbies. Obviously, my hobby does not pay me anything at all. I create things out of little Lego toys. And so about what I make is the occasional contributor over on Patreon, or someone who occasionally buys my portfolio of things that I have created, that I have designed, right? And part of that is my own fault for not promoting my stuff, but ultimately it's nothing that I would ever make a living on where I am currently. Totally fine. I don't do it for that. I do what I love because I love it. But I'm imagining a scenario where I could do something like that, or draw for a living, create art for a living, create music for a living, things that I am passionate about, or even things that maybe I'm not passionate about, but other people are, because we all have our own hobbies. And being able to comfortably do that for a living would honestly be the dream. There are so many people that say, do not go into work doing what you love, because that work will essentially kill your passion for it. And it's not the work itself that does that. It's more often than not the hustle and the environment you have to exist in, right? Because oftentimes that hustle turns this work of yours into a sort of rope around your neck, right? It turns something that you can be passionate about into something you rely upon to live. And so when you face a stressful time, you turn to that thing you rely on, to that passion of yours, and you look at it as a source of stress. You don't hate the thing you loved doing before. You hate the position that you're currently in, thanks to the environment we exist in. And that's a lot of people's realities. There are so many people on this platform and all around the world on many different social media platforms as well, whose life depends on, paycheck to paycheck, making sure that their content doesn't get pulled down for some reason outside of their control, and making sure that they can continue to create the stuff that they love and share the stuff that they love with fans and communities. And there's a beauty to all of that. But what isn't beautiful is someone who's out there whose entire life is essentially, okay, how can I rewrite the laws of this system or exploit this system, exploit these people, rewrite the rules that exist around these people so that I can continue to leech off of them? Because ultimately that's what the life and existence of a multi-billionaire is. I'm not saying that's all billionaires, because there are some people, unfortunately, who are born into that life, right? And you're not in control of the people who you're born to, right? That's not your choice. And there are also many people who have been born to wealthy parents, to wealthy circumstances, who have found themselves in circumstances like that, that are good people, honestly. No, where my criticism tends to come from is the people who chase that dream against all other things, right? There are so many out there, unfortunately, who have went through schooling and learned about this. I've, got a degree in business administration, and so it's wild how the experiences that I have in a book would seem like I am chasing that capitalist dream, and yet I am all of the opposite things, which leads me to my, I guess, next point. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, talking about what I would do if I were president. And this is going to make me sound like a terrible, terrible person. Don't worry, I do not plan to ever become president or run for president, obviously. But yeah, I have some specific principles that I like to stand up to, but there are also a lot of people who do a lot of damage to this country. And in the existence that we are in, we've essentially got two parties that run this country, both of which are bad. One very clearly and outwardly worse. Absolutely, but both bad. I likened it over on the Discord server, linked in the description, for that to essentially a game of tug of war, but where only one side is pulling, and they're pulling towards the flames. And yeah, the other side might not be losing, but they're not gaining ground either. They're not pulling back. They're not trying to steer this country back in the right direction, not fighting for the citizens here. So ultimately, as time progresses, as the timer continues to count down, inevitably we start moving closer and closer and closer to those flames. But that shouldn't be the way that it is, right? I talk about if I were president. Simply put, the thing that would put a target on my back is, yes, there are people I would go after, but I don't mean this in a fascist way, like I'd go after people based on race or based on gender identity or because no, I love people and their stories. I love people for what they bring, all the colors that they can bring to a society. As I mentioned earlier, I talk about things being vanilla, being boring, right? And while that can absolutely have racial connotations to it too, because there are many people trying to fight for this country to be like white and stuff, and that's a bunch of bullshit. It shouldn't be that way. You should be open to and welcoming of people from all walks of life. We learn so much more from having these people here than denying them, and we continue to make progress when we all come together, work together. No, the people I would go after, quote unquote, are people who are very obviously bad. If I won the presidency in 2028, the people that would be going to jail are people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, because of fucking course. That's just the obvious thing to do. These people have broken the law. Democrats will just play complacency, right? They'll just be like, oh, you did a bad thing, I'll wag my finger at you, and that's where it stops. And yeah, the American citizens know they did bad things, but what are the consequences? Right? We expect consequences. What happened? What happened to Donald Trump in the last 4 years that he suffered from? He's worth more now than he was then. He got plastered on TV in a few different court cases, but there was no repercussions to his actions. There was never going to be. And progressives have been calling that shit out for years. Because we've seen it all before. We know better. We're not stupid. We are people. No. People like Donald Trump should not see the light of day again. Obviously. They've done a lot of bad things, and they have built systems where they prey upon the most vulnerable people and create villains of the others. So many people in this country have it hard. Conservatives and liberals and progressives and Democrats and Republicans and whatever alike. We all have our stories. And those stories deserve to be heard. It's not to say you need to hear all of them out. We only have so much time a day, but we need to resort to steering that time, directing that time towards lifting each other up, because it hurts no one to lift another person up. Worst case scenario, your back hurts a little bit, but you're not going to be worse off for it. And honestly, after a while, it might start to feel good, like you're doing the right thing. Everybody loves those videos of a dog pulling a bird out of the water because the bird is struggling to swim or something like that. And we're like, look at this. Nature also shows signs of compassion and empathy too. And yes, we know it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, but that's the way life is. But it's not the way that humans have to be. We have the ability, we have the circumstance from the wealthiest country in the world, but all over the world, to help each other out. And is that a realistic sight? I don't know. I cannot tell you the future. I cannot tell you that there are not going to be struggles along the way, that there are not going to be fights and quarrels. But it is a reality that we don't necessarily need to try and draw blood, right? We don't need to try and go to war over little things like what country am I trying to spite today, or state for that matter. You know, California was just dealing with wildfires that did more damage than, as far as I know, any other wildfire in the history of the United States. And meanwhile, you've got someone like Donald Trump out there who, in spite of that state, because it's a blue state with a bunch of people that did not vote for him, said, hey, National Guard, you need to empty their reservoirs, the reservoirs of water that they need for farming and to help to store water in the rainier seasons for the dry seasons, because California faces so many yearly droughts and periodical droughts, right? And we're like, no, why save that water that could be used by people when I can just say, fuck those people and get rid of their water in front of them, right? It's like going out in the middle of the desert, seeing somebody crawling on the ground looking for water while you have a water bottle in your hand and you dumping it in front of them. And the only person that does that is a bad person. Simple as that. I saw something earlier today where it talked about questions, because we treat these as if they are questions, like, why should people get free health care? And that's horrible framing, right? We are, again, the wealthiest country in the world and the only developed country that does not guarantee that stuff. We absolutely can, and anybody tells you that we can't is just lying. So you have to ask yourself, why are they lying? It's to help protect a system that helps them enrich themselves. We are a country that can afford to make sure that healthcare is free at the point of service because we already pay for it through our taxes. But we opt not to, because if it was free at the point of service, somebody out there would not be getting rich. And we value a few individuals getting rich while many of the poor suffer. We have chosen this model that says that we should be able to live in a world where both people in poverty and billionaires exist, when that should not have ever been allowed to happen. Nobody needs, and I cannot hammer that home enough, I cannot stress it enough, nobody needs $1 billion. Not one person ever needs $1 billion. But many people could use that hand up. Many people could help themselves to a portion of a billionaire's money. If someone out there made $10 million, or being generous, say $50 million, it's my belief they should make no more. And if you ask yourself, well, if they didn't make any more than $50 million, then what reason would they have to contribute any further than that? Maybe they fucking shouldn't. You know, maybe once you've made $50 million, you don't have a reason to contribute anymore. There's only a few of you, but there are so many of us that could be contributing if only we had the needs, right? Who knows how many Albert Einsteins out there have been squashed at the hands of oppression and at the hands of just taking every penny they make from their pockets. Why is it that I should be able to go to a store, stock well over $1,000 or several $1,000s worth of merchandise in an hour, only to bring home $7.25? Why is it that I should work for a store in a non-major city where that store can make over $1 million a day and I make $7.25 an hour, at least at the time when I first worked at Walmart? I was lucky enough to be a very efficient worker, made my way to a supervisor position in well under a year, the fastest person to move up in the position that I was in, and doubled my hourly wage to over $13 an hour. And when management pulled me into the office and said, your wage is going to go up to $15 an hour because we are changing this system to Cap 2 from IMS. If you know Walmart, then you know. You know what I said? Not, oh, yay, goody for me. When my manager asked me if I was happy, it was almost like, oh, okay, am I supposed to feel like I'm gracious to you? Because I said no. Not until my workers receive a raise. I was not a boss. I may have been a supervisor, but you know what my job was? Personally, my job was to do the exact same goddamn job all of my workers did underneath me. I was not told to do that. In fact, it was against the rules for me to do that. And I cannot tell you how many times I was pulled into the office and told not to touch a product that was not my job. My job is to delegate. And I told them, fuck off. No. Because that's not what I do. And you know what my team did? We broke records. We went so goddamn fast because we were a well-oiled machine and we all respected each other. My workers respected me, I respected them, and we were equals, goddammit. And when there wasn't AC in that back room, when it's 100 degrees outside in Missouri, and if you know how fucking hot it is and humid it is in Missouri, you know those trucks are not 100 degrees, they're 120, 130, 140 in some circumstances. So you think I fucking care about your raise when my people are making less? Hell, when it switched over from IMS to CAP 2, their pay decreased, and yet their workload increased. They went from being paid $9 an hour minimum to being paid $7.25, which at the time was the minimum wage an hour. Now, my workers did not receive that pay cut. Instead, they were all given citations for random reasons until inevitably they started being pushed out because they were trying to open up for new workers who did not know that the previous ones got paid $9 an hour. That's the point, right? Get rid of the seniority. Get rid of the people who are already grandfathered into that higher pay raise, which is exactly what they were trying to do. And just as fast as I moved in that supervisor position, I was also kicked out of that supervisor position by a manager who told me, I will do anything I can to get you out of here. I said, bring it. Because the one thing you don't have that I do is speed, is efficiency. I know how this department works, and I can do it faster than anybody else you can put here. And goddamn, I proved them right. But it didn't matter to me. I wasn't there working for that wage. I was there making sure my employees were safe, that my workers who were a part of my team, who were equal to me outside of work when we clocked out, as well as when we clocked in. We were the same people with the same values. I ate lunch with my workers. I did not go sit in the manager's office, even though that was my right to do so. Because I wasn't there for Walmart. I was there for me, to help pay rent where I was staying at that time, and to make sure that my employees were treated fairly, treated responsibly. I gave them more breaks than they were supposed to have, 30 to 45-minute breaks in some cases, or more. Because their job was one thing and they did it very well. And that's how it should be. We should always try to reward the best amongst us, not the worst amongst us. But the system that we have built, the laws that we have in place, are designed so that it's complicated for those with empathy to get in, to justify, to even want to attempt to fix, because it's so goddamn stressful. And you know, I know, that it's stressful to talk about politics. Your blood pressure boils. Everybody talks about those Thanksgiving dinners, and I'm lucky enough that I don't have to deal with stuff like that. But I'm also passionate about this, and I'm passionate about people. People are what make this world go round, and we should reward them for that. If someone wants to go out there and live in the woods and not contribute to society at all, I'm okay with that. And honestly, I would still be okay with allowing them to survive. Because that's their choice. Rightfully so. You should not be expected to contribute 50 plus years of your life to hope, and pray that your retirement is still going to be there so that when you're 65 or 75, that you'll somehow be able to enjoy it in the years of your life where you're at your slowest. It's difficult, and it's not right. It's not fair. People out there should be able to contribute their time, their effort, and their energy into the things that they want to do. And yes, there are absolutely jobs out there that are required for this world to function. I know that. But we need to go out of our way to make sure that everybody has a fair chance. And we need to continue checking in on them along the way to make sure they do not fall too far behind. Because there are often times in this life where we give them one push out the gate and we're like, okay, if you trip and fall, you twist your ankle, whatever, sucks to be you. And that shouldn't be the way we are. We should always try to lift each other up. We should always try to climb our way out of the holes that we might end up creating through means of our own or not. Because sometimes you're knocked over or you're consumed by an earthquake that cracks the ground below you through no fault of your own. You have a medical emergency and now suddenly you're in debt, as somehow that's a thing that we justify in this country. Doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Of course not. come from this at a place of empathy and ask your questions at a place of empathy. And anybody who tells you, oh, we can't afford this thing is lying to you. Okay? I want you to know, even if you are not progressive, that I respect you. Okay? And I respect those with principled beliefs, even if they are not beliefs that I myself hold. I have many stories to talk about from Walmart and many other places that I've worked as well. I've talked to so many people who have disagreed with me in the past. I've been a Bernie supporter since 2016 when he ran his first time. And I talked to people in my own departments after I had moved out of that that Cap 2 department. Well, was forced out, I should mention, where I talked to people who were Trump voters and was still able to get them on the side of someone like Bernie Sanders, because there's a difference between those two people. They're not the same. They're not the same approach. They're not both populists or, anti-establishment. One of these people is anti-establishment, and one of these people is a fucking billionaire who will lie and cheat his way to the top. And yes, he does absolutely have a cult following. At the end of the day, I want this world not only to be a better place for me, hell, I'm willing to sacrifice and make sacrifices so that this world is better for people like you. And I would hope that anybody of any means who believes that they get what they deserve. Because we all deserve a chance, a fighting chance in this world. And we all deserve to be able to enjoy the prime years of our life, not just the end of our life. We all deserve not just to rely on Social Security and some odd how many ever years, if it's even still around by then, with how many ever fucking traps are laid in front of it and how many ever threats come to the existence of something so many people contribute to and rely upon. We all deserve a fighting chance. And we all deserve it when we're in the best means to fight. That's just the way it is. So anyway, I think I've rambled on long enough for this video. Maybe it didn't get fully to all the topics I wanted to talk about. I will continue to bring up some of these points in future videos. But once again, if you did enjoy this content, be sure that you are subscribed, because it does continue to help out the channel. Also, let me know your thoughts on the topics of today's video, as well as what you would like to see commented on future videos in this channel. I also wanted to go ahead and reach out as well, because there are many people that I know in the progressive space, but I know that I don't know all of them. There are many people who contribute to progressive, all kinds of progressive things that I'm not aware of. There are also many people who I forget. So while in the last video in the description, I shouted out a bunch of relatively large channels over here on YouTube that I think you should go ahead and check out and subscribe to as well. I would like to know who you think I should also check out, who have similar beliefs to mine, or who you might think will challenge my beliefs, because I'm absolutely wanting to look at this from both sides with an open mind. And I want to make sure that everybody is represented here. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Stay warm. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.